These are the same watchers referenced in the book of Daniel. So these are the holy watchers of heaven. 200 of them defect from the kingdom of heaven. Why? Enoch leaves no room for doubt. The sons of God lusted after the daughters of men. That doesn't fit nicely into most people's theological framework. If you have the capacity to lust, if you feel the lustful impulse, it's because you have the associated biology.
Right, the physical ability.
So what do? They do exactly what Genesis 6 says they do. They descend to the earth, and they bind themselves by mutual imprecations. One for all for one. We are all going to pay the penalty of this great sin, is what they say. So they know that this is in direct defiance of heaven, what they're doing. I think we can presume that the watchers chose their wives, went to their fathers and said, we want to marry these women. And in exchange, we're going to give you knowledge from which you can derive technology. We're going to teach you the secrets you've been striving to learn. That's what it says in the Book of Enoch, that they taught them the secrets they were striving to learn. But it's a bargain, and that's important. Why are the watchers bargaining instead of just raping women? They are bargaining with the governors of the earth. They're making a legal transaction.
Because they don't have the authority, we have the authority.
Exactly right. They're teaching them how to make weapons of war, for one thing. Through this knowledge, the human species was corrupted. And this was part of the plan of the watchers. Watchers have a plan, okay? They procreate, they progenerate through their wives a race of hybrid giants. I believe that the watchers, their real objective was dominion of the earth through their hybrid sons, who are human enough to inherit the authority of Adam. And they can legally govern the earth according to the rules. And men have to spend all of their energy feeding the giants. In other words, serving them. Men become the slaves to these giants. It was a Faustian bargain. And when they could no longer satiate their enormous appetites, the giants began to devour mankind. And now God decides to intervene. Why? Because mankind begins to petition heaven. And he sends a handful of angels down to the earth to bind the watchers. They're bound and they're forced to watch, to observe the destruction of their beloved sons, the giants. The point is that the spirits of dead giants are still active in the world and can be contacted.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Resilience Show. I am back here with Tim Alberino. And if you hadn't tuned in last week for the part one of this, go back and check it out. We're going to jump right back in where we left off. I interviewed John Burke, wrote the book, Imagine Heaven. Have you read this book?
No.
So it's an incredible book. He interviews about 1,500 near-death experience, people that were dead for, I'm probably not quoting accurately, over 10 minutes. They were dead. And one of the consistent things that I picked up out of it, there's a lot of things, great things in the book. One of the consistent things that I picked up was everyone that had this experience described their near-death or their experience in the afterlife to be 1,000 times more physical.
Isn't that interesting?
And for me, I've always thought before that, like when I die, when I'm in the kingdom of heaven or a spiritual realm, that it's going to be like almost like a dream state. But no, it's 1,000 times more physical.
The kingdom of heaven is a kingdom.
Yeah, it's
a kingdom. You know, the one of the primary names for God in the Old Testament is Lord of armies. Mm-hmm. The Lord of hosts. That word is martial. It means armies. Lord of armies. Why do armies exist? Why does an army exist? An army exists to protect the borders of a realm.
Kingdom, yeah.
Okay, so this realm, everything that we have on earth, our governmental hierarchies that we have on earth, the system of governments that we've created here, the fact that we have courts of law, the fact that we have everything that we know of civilization, all of the trademarks of civilization, we didn't invent them. We inherited them. They pre-existed us. There's a place called the kingdom of heaven. I always ask this question. I think it's a question that if you think about it hard enough, will force will force a rearranging of the theological furniture in your brain. Mm-hmm. Does the kingdom of heaven have locality? What does that mean? Can you go there? If you had infinite technology and energy sources or what, could you get there? Could you go there? Is it a physical place? And those are kind of two different questions, but let's start with the last one first. Is the kingdom of heaven a physical place? The answer is obviously yes, because Jesus said, at the Last Supper, we talked about earlier, when he drank of the cup, when he drank wine, he said, I will not do this again until I do it in my Father's kingdom. Eating and drinking and merrymaking and music.
Which means a digestive tract.
Exactly. All of these things are components of the kingdom of heaven. We didn't invent these things. They come from somewhere else. When you read in the Psalms that the children of Israel ate the sustenance of the angels in the wilderness, they ate the bread of heaven. This is what it says: the bread of heaven, or the grain of heaven, the sustenance of the angels.
It's physical.
What did they eat in the desert when they wandered in Sinai? They ate manna. What does manna mean? It means, what is it? That's what manna means. What is it? That manna came from heaven. It was grain. It was grain that fell. They would collect the grain and bake it into bread. But that grain, according to the psalmist, is the grain of heaven, the sustenance of the angels. So
they were delivering food.
Exactly. They're delivering grain. So if we were to take that literal, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should, but if we were to take that literal, then you can back engineer that. Well, if there's grain, then there's crops, right? And if there's crops, then there's sowers of crops. And that grain is baked into bread. There's sustenance, just as the psalmist says, the sustenance of the angels. There's sustenance in the kingdom of heaven. And so people assume that because angels are immortal, they don't do anything that we do. Well, the biblical narrative proves the opposite. They do everything we do. They eat and drink. They do it in several occasions in the Old Testament. They ate and drank with Abraham. They ate and drank with Lot. And I don't think they pretended to eat and drink. I think they ate and drank.
They also protect and defend.
That's exactly right. I mean, they use vehicles of conveyance, with which the writers of the Old Testament call the chariots of God, the chariots of Israel. These are, or the chariots of fire, sometimes they're called. These are vehicles of conveyance that angels are riding in. So the idea that only human beings use technology, I think, is preposterous. This is a civilization. We have divorced, for whatever reason, we have divorced the kingdom of heaven from anything that is familiar to us. We've made it this airy-fairy, ethereal realm where it's just what? Spirits.
Yeah, float in the crowd as spirit.
And it's just not, I'm sorry, but it's just not biblical. It's not biblical. There's something called the marriage supper of the Lamb that's going to take place when Christ returns, and people can say, well, that just takes place on the earth. The problem is that Jesus, remember when the centurion came and said, teacher, my servant is sick. And Jesus said, well, I'll get up and come to your home. I'll come to him. And what did the centurion say? No. I'm not worthy to have you in my house. I'm a man under authority also, and I know that you can make my servant well. You don't have to come to my house. And Jesus marveled at his faith. He marveled at the centurion's faith, because he's sitting here amongst his brethren, amongst the Jews, and this kind of faith was not found among them. And yet here's a centurion of the Roman Empire. And he has faith in Christ. By the way, that's saving faith.
Yes.
That the centurion had. All he did was recognize that Jesus was who he said he was. Who did Jesus say he was? The Son of God. And so the centurion recognized that, and he recognized Christ's authority, that he was indeed the Son of God. That was saving faith. In fact, Jesus turned to the Jews and the teachers of the law sitting around him, and he said that there's going to be gnashing of teeth and wailing, because this centurion, paraphrasing, is going to be sitting at the table with your father Abraham, feasting. But you people, not all of the ones who are disbelieving, would be cast out. You wouldn't be invited to the banquet. You wouldn't be invited to the table.
Simply because of his belief.
Right. Is this just a metaphor, or is there going to be eating and drinking in the kingdom of heaven? There is eating and drinking in the kingdom of heaven. There is. There's no reason to think that there isn't. And it's not done just to go through a motion of eating and drinking. It's done because that's what that civilization does. And we do it because they do it. We inherited civilization. We didn't invent it. So what I'm trying to get people to do is to, and frankly, this is what Christ was doing with the parables, was to get people to contemplate the kingdom of heaven in a way that is practical, that is tangible, that we can understand, because this is a shadow of that. This civilization is a shadow. We've inherited the trademarks of civilization, but they predate us. They pre-exist us. There's a place called the kingdom of heaven. I personally believe it's at the center of the universe.
Yes. Yeah.
And by the way, I was talking about becoming sons of God earlier, that we're given power to become the sons of God. What's the power? The resurrection. So how are we going into the kingdom? With bodies, with our bodies, because we know that we're going to be like Christ. And Christ was crucified and died and buried. And then he was resurrected.
A physical body.
His body was resurrected. Not a representation of his body, his body. He had the marks of the crucifixion in his hands and on his feet and on his side. This is what he invited Thomas to touch his hands and his side. And then when Jesus, this is a representation of the resurrected body, of the abilities, the capabilities of the resurrected body. Jesus appears to his disciples as they're gathered together in the upper room. He appears to them. And then what does he say to them? They're freaked out. They're scared because they think he's a ghost. What does he say to them? He said, "Peace, be still." He said, "Flesh." He said, basically, I'm not a ghost. See that I am flesh and bone. Touch me. See that I am flesh and bone. I'm not a ghost. And then what does he do? He says, have you anything to eat? And then they give him fish and bread. He sits down and he eats it before them. Why did he do that? To prove to them that he had a physical body, that this was physically, literally him. This wasn't a representation of him, a projection of him. This was him as they knew him before the crucifixion. He's in his body and he's eating. And that's what we're going to be doing in the kingdom of heaven.
Restored physical bodies.
That's right. We're going to get our bodies, but without any of the genetic defects due to genetic degeneration from Adam. We're going to be restored to the blueprint of mankind and brought back into the family of God.
One of the things that you and I spoke off camera about that we both agree with is we are not at our pinnacle of man.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Not only do I not believe in evolution, I believe we've devolved from Adam, and
we have certainly devolved. We've got it backwards.
Right.
Adam was magnificent. He was the prototypical human being. Adam was perfect. There were no errors in his genetic code. Imagine a person, a human being, who's genetically perfect, who every fiber of his being, every cell is running at 100% efficiency. Imagine how intelligent that person would be.
Using 100% of your brain.
Using 100%, not only of their brain, of every constituent of their physical body is operating 100%. This individual today would barely look human to us because we are so degenerate. We have degenerated genetically from Adam to such an extent that I believe we're going to become reproductively inviable before long.
It's happening. I mean, fertility rates are
plummeting, and it's not just chemical; it's genetic.
Yeah.
There's a book called Countdown. I forget the name of the doctor who wrote it, but she predicts that the sperm count of males in the West is going to zero in 2045. That's the human species becoming reproductively inviable, and it's not just those of us who are living in the modern society and being bombarded with chemicals and all kinds of mutagens and all of the signals and waves that we're exposed to all the time. It's the human species at large, really, when you look at the data. Right. It's the human species at large. Not only us. I mean, the major problem that we have right now, it's an epidemic. It's not discussed as an epidemic, but it's an epidemic, is
Sure.
cancer. Cancer is an epidemic.
Yes.
And it doesn't just affect us, it affects all animals. Right. All kinds of animals are getting cancer and dying. Not just dogs, not just our pets, but deer and wildlife is getting cancer. And the reason why is because I think this is like a clock. The genetic clock of life on Earth was, it started off as perfect and it has been steadily declining, devolving over the millennia. And so if when you make copies of copies of copies of copies of copies, what happens?
Degenerates.
You degenerate, which means you lose information.
Yeah.
Or that information becomes corrupted. This is called mutational load. So we are carrying now, after thousands of years of genetic degeneration, we are carrying a burdensome mutational load, which means much of our genome is mutated. But we're not like mutants in the X-Men sense. We're the opposite of that.
We're the opposite, yeah. I mean, if that's what I love thinking about the regenerated physical bodies in the kingdom of heaven, because you think about who Adam was. Like, I mean, I imagine Adam to have like non-verbal communication abilities with other humans, with plants, the ability to, you talked about earlier, being able to move objects. It's
an inference of mine. Why? Because what was Adam created for? There are two principal purposes for the creation of Adam. And these things are clear in the scripture. Number one, Adam was created for fellowship in the family of God. So he was created to fellowship, to commune with the maker of the universe. Mm-hmm. And then also with his elder siblings and with creation. And that goes, I believe, beyond verbal communication. Verbal communication is a lower form of communication. Imagine if you and I could communicate at the speed of thought. How much information we could pass between each other in a very short period of time. Yeah. Much more than our clumsy attempt to verbalize our thoughts through the modulation of our vocal cords. This is a very clumsy, slow process. If you could communicate at the speed of thought, communication would be instantaneous. So I believe
less miscommunication.
There would be, exactly right. There would be no miscommunication.
Yeah.
None. So if we were created to commune with the maker, then that's what I expect of the human species, number one. The second thing that we were created for was to govern the earth. We were given the ability, we were given the genetic capabilities to govern the earth. And everything that entails. And that's why we were created in the image and likeness of the Elohim. So when people say we're created in the image and likeness of God, this gets mingled. I think this gets mingled both by pastors preaching from the pulpit and theologians, because there's an assumption at the core of this idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God. It's an assumption. It's a presupposition that is erroneous. And that presupposition is that only we were created in the image and likeness of God. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that only mankind was created in the image and likeness of God. That's just not true. We were created in the image and likeness of the sons of God because we're in the same family. And this makes perfect sense. If I were to bring in my 5 sons and stand them before you, and I asked you, which of my sons was created in my image and likeness?
All of them.
All of them. Why? Because they're all my sons. Mm-hmm. That's why the elder race and the human race look similar. That's why, according to Genesis 6, and then extrapolate in the Book of Enoch, that's why we are reproductively compatible. We can procreate. Because we're so similar. We were created to be members of the same family. We're not the same, but we're very similar. So unless people think that I'm saying that divorcing the image of God from God himself, I am not. Because who is the express image and likeness of the Father according to the New Testament? Jesus.
Yes.
He is the preeminent Son. So ultimately, we and our elder siblings are made in his likeness, in the likeness of the Son of God. So we're created in the likeness of the Son of God. And that means us and our elder siblings, all of the siblings in the family bear the image and likeness of their father. Now, are all sentient beings in the universe sons? The answer is no.
Right.
So there could be sentient beings in the universe who...
Sentient is intelligent.
Who potentially come from other civilizations who don't look like us because they're not part of the family. They weren't created to be members of the family, but we were. Mm-hmm. And the members of the family are endowed with authority to govern. That's why in the Bible, these beings are called princes, archons. They're governors. By the way, there's a word that's used in the New Testament. We've actually interpreted it as principality. Mm-hmm. And people have taken this word and done all kinds of wacky things with it. People will say that principality is a high-ranking angel that has authority over cities or whatever. That's poppycock. Mm-hmm. A principality is simply a realm governed by a prince. So planet Earth is a realm that is governed by human beings, by the sons and daughters of Adam.
So with us as regents, heirs as sons of God, and we have the authority over the earth, does that mean that any non-human entity could have power or rule on this planet?
It means that our authority is enforced by the kingdom of heaven. So I'll illustrate this I'll explain this with this illustration. So let's say that I am a king, and I've conquered a new realm in my kingdom, essentially my empire, and I want to govern that realm. So I send you as my vice regent, my representative. I send you to this far off part of my kingdom that was just conquered, that just came under my dominion, so that you can govern it in my name, which is what, of course, kings and emperors did.
Yep.
So there's two things you're going to need in order to fulfill this mandate successfully. Number one, you are going to need a certificate of authorization. You're going to need to bear something, to take something with you that certifies that you are acting in my authority. Some authenticating token, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can't just show up and say, hey, I'm supposed to govern this place. No, the people have to know that you are representing me, right? It's necessary. That's number one. Number two, you need the backing of my armies. Because even if you show up with a token of your authority, the people have to understand that what that represents is that if they disobey you, they're disobeying me. Mm-hmm. And that if they rebel against you, they're rebelling against me, the king, which means that they're going to face my armies. That my armies are going to show up to enforce my will and to enforce your authority as my governor. Correct?
That's correct.
Well, the kingdom of heaven operates in the same way. Mm-hmm. So if mankind is given authority, dominion of planet Earth, which we were, in Genesis it says, have dominion, subdue the earth, have dominion, not take dominion, have dominion. The dominion of earth was bequeathed to mankind. It's a gift. And according to Paul, the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. It was given to Adam and his descendants forever. And it will be governed by a descendant of Adam, one Jesus of Nazareth. So, ultimately, we're given authority to govern the earth. So what is the token of our authority?
We're the image bearers of...
Exactly right.
We're the image bearers.
We are literally made in the image of the King. And this becomes quite explicit when you look at history and you realize that it was a common practice. Let's go back to our scenario that when a king would dispatch, I should have said this before I gave you the punchline, that when a king when a king dispatched a delegate, that delegate would carry with him the seal of the king's authority. And that seal was oftentimes potentates and kings would have signet rings. Mm-hmm. They would have some sort of a token of their authority so that when they would sign a document, that they would take for example, their signet ring, which most often had a facsimile of their own likeness, like their face, right? Mm-hmm. They would take that signet ring and they would take the document and they would seal the document with softened resin or wax. Then they would take their ring with, again, the facsimile of their likeness, and they would press it into that softened resin or wax. And then it would leave an imprint of their likeness. So that's how they would authorize documents. So how did the King of Heaven authorize our authority on earth? He made us in his likeness. He took his signet ring, as it were, and he pressed it into earth and clay. And he created the human species in his likeness. And what does that mean? That signifies to all would-be contenders that these are siblings in the royal family. And what does that mean? If you screw with them, then you're going to face the armies of the kingdom. Because the kingdom of heaven enforces our authority. So you have the seal of our authority in the image of God, and you have the backing of the armies of heaven to enforce our authority on earth. So this is what keeps our enemies at bay.
This is so important because so important to believers, because many believers believe that this world is ruled and governed by Satan.
That's unbiblical.
It's unbiblical.
That's totally unbiblical.
But many believers believe this, right?
Most believers believe that. So there's a really good way to illustrate that this is not the case. And I know we could talk about this forever, but this is a really important illustration. So in the book of Daniel, you have a very intriguing scenario in which King Nebuchadnezzar is being judged by the council of heaven, by the watchers. It says the holy watchers are sentencing him based on his dealings with the children of Israel who had been taken into exile by the Babylonians. So the watchers decree that Nebuchadnezzar is going to be in a state of madness for 7 seasons, maybe 7 years. And that's what happens. His mind is replaced with the mind of a beast. He eats grass. He's outside. He's basically like a wild animal. Well, this is intriguing because after the 7 years are fulfilled, or the 7 seasons, whatever that is, Nebuchadnezzar recognizes the King of Heaven. He extols the King of Heaven. He acknowledges him as the one true God, and acknowledges that his rule was bestowed on him from the King of Heaven. So this is the mechanism of the hierarchy of the kingdom of heaven at work and how it relates to the earth. Who is governing Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar, the human king. Not a fallen angel, not Satan. Nebuchadnezzar. And God, in no uncertain terms, tells him that he will appoint or depose whomever he sees fit. So who's in control of this thing? The King of Heaven. So the King of Heaven is the ultimate authority. And on earth, the sons of Adam govern. Now, can we be influenced? Can we be manipulated by non-human forces? Yes, we can. We can enter into contracts with non-human forces. In the old days, they did it through idolatry. So when a nation would fall into idolatry, turn away from the God of heaven and go after other gods, what we would call fallen angels or the hosts of heaven, then by doing that, they're entering into a contractual relationship with these beings and giving them influence, allowing them to have influence in the realm.
Forfeiting our authority.
Forfeiting our authority. And this is initiated by us. It's initiated by us. And this is the way that the Game of Thrones is played on earth. And this is further illustrated in the story of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch.
If you've read the Bible at all, you know about this guy named Lucifer, who was part of the family. What do we call our elder race? You use the word elder race.
The elder race.
Our elder race, our bigger brothers, right? And so Lucifer was cast from heaven due to rebellion. That's the best story that everyone knows. But a lot of people miss this other story of a group of the elder race called the Watchers, 200 of them. And it's not just mentioned in the Book of Enoch, but it's also mentioned in the Bible that everyone's familiar with in Genesis 6:4, where it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old and men of renown. What's that mean in Genesis?
Well, there we have
6:4?
the sons of God again. B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God. Again, as I said before, that term is only ever used of the angelic sons of God, never of human beings. So what we have here are the heavenly sons of God, these angelic beings who are essentially lusting after the daughters of men. They descend to the earth and they copulate with them, and the product of their union are giants, the Nephilim.
And these are the watchers.
These are the watchers.
And what was their job in heaven like, or their job?
I think that the word watcher is synonymous, as it is in English, with guardian.
Okay.
These are throne guardians, and by extension, these are guardians of the kingdom of heaven. These are princes.
Right.
So I believe that the watchers are the princes of heaven. I personally believe that the watcher designation is synonymous with the cherubim.
Okay.
Cherubim are, of course, throne guardians. This was the iconography in the ancient Near East, that cherubim are not, the idea of throne guardians and cherubim this is not exclusive to the Hebrew culture. This is the iconography of the Mesopotamians, of the ancient Egyptians, and so on. So the idea is that these are high-ranking princes in the kingdom of heaven.
So they're looking on earth, looking at the women of earth.
And there's something that we should note, because last time we were talking about how we're similar to the sons of God. Mankind was created to be a little lower than the heavenly beings, i.e. the sons of God. And we're so similar that I said we are reproductively compatible. It probably threw people for a loop. But the reason why I say that is because of Genesis 6 and then the extrapolation of Genesis 6, which we find in the Book of Enoch. And you have sons of God copulating with the daughters of men. This is a union that, again, produces a new race of being on earth. So we are genetically compatible.
Even if those people out there said, well, maybe they didn't actually have sex with humans and they reproduced some other way, but the Bible taught they lusted after.
So the Bible insinuates that they lusted after the daughters of men. They saw them that they were beautiful or comely.
Right.
Well, that is, again, insinuating lust. But the Book of Enoch is explicit.
Yeah.
That the angels of heaven, it designates them as the angels of heaven, by the way. And I should note that the Septuagint, which we mentioned last time, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that the Septuagint reads, not the sons of God here, but rather the angels of heaven. So there was no question in the mind of the Jews in the Second Temple period who these sons of God were. They were not the sons of Seth, as so many preachers say today, present these verses as if it was the human sons, the sons of Seth were the sons of God. No, these are not human beings. These are clearly angelic beings. And really, it's an absurdity. How can you have human plus human equals giant?
Right.
No, that's not the case. Angel plus human equals giant.
We're definitely going to dig in, but before we do, not everyone listening knows what the Book of Enoch is.
Okay,
what is the Book of Enoch?
So the Book of Enoch was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, so it's part of the corpus of texts.
In like the 1940s, right?
Yeah, 1947, I believe. And the book, that was the majority of the Book of Enoch found among the Dead Sea Scrolls is in Aramaic, but there are some Greek fragments as well. And the Book of Enoch is, I think, the first thing that we should say about the Book of Enoch, it is a compilation of texts. Mm-hmm. It's not one text by one author. It's multiple texts by multiple authors. And the dating of the different sections is variegated. It's different. So we know that the earliest portions of the Book of Enoch were compiled at least before 300 BC or thereabouts. There's some speculation by scholars that the latter parts of the Book of Enoch might have been compiled in the 1st century AD. Mm-hmm. But the oldest sections are definitely pre-Christian era, or definitely precede the birth of Christ by hundreds of years at least. It is possible that some of the text of Enoch derives from a much older document. Indeed, I would contend one whose origin is in the antediluvian world, whose origin is Enoch. I'm not saying that what we call today the Book of Enoch was written by Enoch, but I think some of it is based on what Enoch wrote, or is an exact copy of what Enoch wrote, some of it.
Yeah. Just for the listeners, Enoch was a person.
Enoch was the seventh from Adam.
Yeah. Seventh.
The son of Jared.
Okay.
And the father of Methuselah. Okay. And Enoch was, it's very important to understand that Enoch was considered to be both a scribe and a prophet to the Jews, to the Hebrews. That's very important, because a scribe is a scribe because he writes things, right? And a prophet is a prophet because he prophesies. And in fact, Enoch is considered in the Jewish culture to be the preeminent prophet and scribe of the antediluvian world, and one of the most preeminent prophets and scribes, period. So the Jews, especially the Second Temple Jews, believe that Enoch wrote something and that he prophesied. And in fact, we find a portion of Enoch's prophecy copy and pasted from the Book of Enoch into the New Testament, specifically into the Book of Jude.
There's a lot of cooperation between the Book of Enoch and through the scriptures.
Okay, so it's copied and pasted verbatim, a handful of verses, into the Book of Jude in the New Testament. Jude said that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied saying, and then he pastes the prophecy from the Book of Enoch into his epistle, into the Book of Jude. So there we have a witness, not just of some random thing that Enoch prophesied somewhere, but specifically the first verses from the Book of Enoch, pasted into the Bible, referenced as prophecy. That is very important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But then the story, the tale, what I call the Enochian tale that is related in the Book of Enoch, in the first portion called the Book of the Watchers, which is the historic portion of the Book of Enoch, the historical account rather. That story undergirds so much of what's happening in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. You cannot separate out the 66 books of the Bible, the 66 books that we call the Bible today. You cannot separate out from them the narrative of Enoch. It forms in some sense the substrate for the conceptualization, the worldview of the Hebrew people. Their cosmology is based to some extent on the Book of Enoch, and specifically on the Book of the Watchers. So let me clarify something here. As I said, the Book of Enoch is a compilation of texts. So a lot of people want to have a binary choice as it pertains to the Book of Enoch. It's good, it's bad. It's scripture, it's not scripture. We should read it, we shouldn't read it. The issue is much more complex. We have to have a complex approach to the Book of Enoch. Portions of the Book of Enoch, I think, are authenticated by the Bible. But then there are other portions of the Book of Enoch, the latter portions, which I think belong in the category of Jewish mysticism, which was very common in Second Temple Judaism. So you have to be able to parse this, to divide out the portions which are foundational to some of the biblical narrative, namely the Book of the Watchers, the first part of section 1 of Book of Enoch.
Which is a very important part.
Which is, yes, that's the narrative. But also, I believe personally that the preceding section in the Book of Enoch, which is called the Book of Parables, is also very, very important and foundational to the New Testament in regard to the Christology of the apostles of Christ, of the disciples, of the writers of the New Testament, and the eschatology, not only of the apostles, but of Christ himself. In fact, the claims of Jesus of Nazareth are informed to some extent by the parables in Enoch, because the parables of Enoch are the oracles of Enoch. These are the prophecies. Now, there is a contention that the parables were written after Christ, and that some scholars even say that the parables were written after the New Testament, because there's just too much synchronicity between the parables and the New Testament, especially eschatological and Christological content. I don't believe that. I believe that that the parables were clearly written before Christ, in my estimation. And then there's another contention that I'll deal with right up in front, right in front here, and that is that the Book of Enoch, there's a contention that the Book of Enoch is invalidated because it is revealed to Enoch in the parables that he is the Son of Man, this messianic figure that's being described in the parables and the oracles of Enoch, that in fact Enoch is that Son of Man. And so a lot of scholars and theologians and pastors conveniently see this one verse in the parables of Enoch and say, see, this is anti-biblical, because clearly Enoch is not the Son of Man.
Right.
Biblically speaking, that's Christ. But the problem is that I don't believe that phrase was in the original document. Why do I think that? Because the reason why we have the Book of Enoch today, as we have it, is because in 1773, the Scottish explorer James Bruce traveled to Abyssinia, to Ethiopia, and he discovered the Book of Enoch. In fact, he found 3 copies of it. It was written in Ge'ez, which is the liturgical language of the Ethiopians. And the reason why the Ethiopians had preserved the Book of Enoch was because they inducted it into their canon, whereas the rest of Christendom rejected the Book of Enoch. There was a great dispute over this. The Ethiopian church, both the Ethiopian Tawahedo Orthodox Christians and the Jewish community and the Ethiopian Jews, both of them inducted it into their respective canons.
Right.
So they thereby preserving the Book of Enoch through the centuries. And the Enoch was all but forgotten in the Western world, Western scholarship, until James Bruce traveled there in 1773, found 3 copies, and he brought back a copy to England. He gave a copy to the King of France. Then he deposited one in the Bodleian Library at Oxford, and one he kept for himself.
And then fast forward to 1947, the original text is found with the Dead Sea
Confirmation of
Scrolls.
the Dead Sea Scrolls. Confirmation of the Ge'ez tradition and of R.H. Charles' translation. So R.H. Charles, years later, back in the 20th century, or the 19th century, I can't remember, R.H. Charles, who was an Anglican scholar, would create the definitive translation of the Ge'ez copy of Enoch into English. Mm-hmm. And Charles, when he encountered this verse in the parables, again, the parables are the oracles of Enoch, the prophetic content from Enoch. When Charles encountered this verse that we were discussing, this controversial verse where the angel tells Enoch, "You are the Son of Man," I believe he rightly corrects it, because clearly Enoch is not the Son of Man in the oracles. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense. If you read the oracles of Enoch in the parables of Enoch, clearly Enoch is not himself the Son of Man.
Right.
Okay. R.H. Charles recognized that, being the good scholar that he is, and changed it. So I just wanted to deal with that contention right up front. So I believe that the parables are authentic. And that's important, because if the parables are authentic, then they're self-authenticating because they predict Christ. And if they were written before Christ and they predict Christ, then we know, according to the angel who told John, that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So it's self-authenticating. And the prophetic content regarding the Son of Man, by the way, a proper title, the Son of Man, not a descriptor. This is very important in the Book of Enoch. That's where that title comes from. That is in reference to Christ. This is in reference to the Messiah. And what does Jesus call himself? More than any other title, Son of Man.
Son of Man.
That is his preferred title. So scholars have wondered about this for a long time. Why does Jesus, out of all the messianic titles he could have chosen, Son of David, for example, why does he call himself the Son of Man? And what they do is they go back to Daniel, where Daniel saw one in a vision, saw one like a Son of Man. That's a descriptor. It's not a title. So Jesus isn't using a proper title from a descriptor in the book of Daniel. He's using the proper title, Son of Man, from the oracles of Enoch, which predict the coming of the Son of Man, who would be the great judge. So I believe that the parables of Enoch are authentic. They prophesied Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, before he was born, explicitly, by the way, that he would be the light of the Gentiles, that in his name they would be saved. This is in the parables. So there is a contention because the parables are not found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's true. So there is contention around the parables. This is just my personal opinion. I think that the parables are an older part of the Book of Enoch, and probably, I would say, I believe very strongly that these are the oracles of Enoch, the seventh from Adam, that Enoch prophesied these parables. So I just want to deal with those contentions right out of the gate, because people close their ears as soon as they hear me start talking about the Book of Enoch because of these contentions. Right. But we can go back to the first section of the Book of Enoch.
Chapter 1, chapter 1 or section 1.
The narrative part.
Right.
There is no doubt that the narrative section of Enoch, called the Book of the Watchers, predates Christ. There's no doubt. It does. It's the oldest section of Enoch. So this narrative, as I said before, is an extrapolation of Genesis 6. Actually, that's not the right way to say it. Genesis 6 is a reference to this narrative. That's the correct way to say it. Okay? So when the author of Genesis writes about the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, he is referencing a story that was already well known among the Hebrews. And we know that that's the case because there's this peculiar digression all of a sudden that he takes in the narrative of Genesis, talks about these sons of God, and then the Nephilim, without any further explanation.
Because it's known.
Because it's known. Because the story was thoroughly chronicled elsewhere, in written form and oral tradition. It was well known. He didn't have to take the time to retread that territory. The audience already knew exactly what he was talking about. Why? Because of the Book of Enoch. I would contend that were you to go back in time and visit the synagogues in Judea during the time of Christ, you would find in those synagogues a scroll in their scriptoriums that was representative of what we call today the Book of Enoch. In other words, it would have the story of the Watchers in it. That's how foundational it was. There is no question that the Book of Enoch is referenced many times in the Bible, directly and indirectly, mostly indirectly, but of course in Jude directly. Peter mentions it indirectly, and Christ makes references. For one example is the mansions in heaven, which we already discussed earlier, right? Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. Where is that in the Old Testament? Nowhere. It's in the Book of Enoch. That there are mansions in heaven. So, we could go on and on.
Leviticus talks about a watcher, talks about the head watcher, Azuzel.
Specifically the Watcher denomination, people assume that's extra biblical. It's not, as we talked about in our last discussion. It's in the book of Daniel. The Watcher denomination. It's the Watchers of heaven who are judging King Nebuchadnezzar. And these are holy watchers, right? So these are princes. These are members of what Dr. Heiser would define as the divine council. So
not extra biblical.
Not extra biblical at all. So this is how the Book of Enoch begins. The narrative section, it doesn't begin here. This enters in at chapter 6. Ironically, Arch Charles, whether intentionally or unintentionally, begins the story of the Watchers in chapter 6, which is precisely where Genesis 6, the story of the sons of God. I think he did that intentionally. So the Book of the Watchers relates the story of the Watchers, the fall of the Watchers, which begins with the Watchers in heaven. These are the same watchers referenced in the book of Daniel. So these are the holy watchers of heaven, okay? 200 of them defect from the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because, and Enoch is explicit, we infer in Genesis 6 that the sons of God lusted. Enoch leaves no room for doubt. The sons of God lusted after the daughters of men, writes Enoch. So this is what I call the first cause. And this is the one that we have to grapple with, right, theologically. The sons of God lusted. That's problematic. That doesn't fit nicely into most people's theological framework.
Spiritual, floating on a cloud world.
Exactly. Yeah. How do non-corporeal, ethereal beings lust? How is that possible? If you lust, if you have the capacity to lust, if you feel the lustful impulse, it's because you have the associated biology.
Right, the physical ability.
You have the equipment, right? And so clearly the Book of Enoch establishes this is the sexual impulse. The watchers are lusting after the daughters of men. So what do? They do exactly what Genesis 6 says they do. They descend to the earth. And there's 200 of them. And when they descend to the earth, they descend on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they take an oath, according to the Book of Enoch, and they bind themselves by mutual imprecations, which is one for all for one.
Yeah, they make oath with one another, right?
We are all going to pay the penalty of this great sin, is what they say. So they know that this is in direct defiance of heaven, what they're doing. These are princes in the kingdom of heaven who are defecting. They know that what they're doing is going to kindle the ire of the king of heaven. So they bind themselves together. And in fact, the summit of Hermon, Mount Hermon, has been known since time immemorial as the mountain of oath. And there was an altar found there with an inscription regarding the oath that was taken on the summit of Hermon. So this is a story that was well known, not just to the Hebrews, but to the Canaanites. So after the watchers bind themselves by mutual imprecations, they descend into the plains, and they choose from among the daughters of men, each one of them a wife, a woman, a maiden that they desired to wed. Okay? And so far, everything I've said is explicit in Enoch. Now I'm going to say something that's not explicit, but it is implied. It is implicit. And that is that the watchers did not steal these women. They didn't throw them over their shoulders and take them into a tent and fornicate with them. Rather, they observed and they chose each one which woman. And they each chose which woman they wanted to wed. And the reason why I believe that this is what happened was because this is a patriarchal society, okay? We all know the ancient world, especially the antediluvian world, was a patriarchal society. The women didn't choose their husbands. The husbands chose the wives. And when they wanted to wed a maiden, the man chose the maiden that he wanted to wed. And then what did he do? He went to the father. He went to the father. Patriarchal society. You go to the father. Only the father has the right to give his daughter's hand in marriage. And he required a dowry. And even in post-flood times, we know that was the case in the ancient world. If you desired to marry a maiden, especially if she was of high estate, you had to pay a dowry. So this is what's happening here. So the watchers choose their wives. Then they go to this is the part that I think is implicit, not explicit, but implicit. I'm filling in the gap here.
Yeah.
The watchers went to the fathers of these maidens and offered them a dowry. Now we're getting back into the narrative.
But but then it is explicit at what they offer them.
Yes, because the watchers teach them the secrets that they were desiring to learn, which ends up being technology. So
weaponry, warcraft, sorcery.
So I think we can presume that the watchers chose their wives, chose the maidens, went to their fathers and said, "We want to marry these women, and in exchange, we are going to teach you. We're going to give you knowledge from which you can derive technology. We're going to teach you the secrets you've been striving to learn. That's what it says in the Book of Enoch, that they taught them the secrets they were striving to learn.
Forbidden
And why am I so emphatic on this point? Because it's a bargain. It's a Faustian bargain, but it's a bargain, and that's important. This is a bargain. Why are the Watchers bargaining instead of just raping women? Because they're walking a very fine line. They are bargaining with the governors of the earth. They're making a legal transaction. It's a very important point. This is a legal transaction.
Because they don't have the authority, we have the authority.
Exactly right. They're in our room. So they got to, if they don't play by the rules, what happens? We were talking about last time.
The king comes.
The armies of the kingdom show up.
And they know that better than we do.
They know that better than we do. They know exactly what that means. So they're playing by the rules. They're striking a bargain with the children of men, with the governors of planet Earth. And not only do they desire to copulate with these women, they were lusting after the women, but also they wanted to marry them and progenerate offspring. They wanted families. That's what they want. So they don't just take these women and rape them, they enter into the binding covenant of marriage. It's a contract. They make a contract with them through marriage, with their fathers, with the dowry, the technology, the knowledge that they endow them with. And now you have a legal, binding transaction between the sons of God in heaven and the sons of God on earth. They're walking a very fine legal line here. We know this is the case because God doesn't judge this activity for 1,000 years, at the very least.
Yeah, that's kind of the math I think you break out.
According to the Septuagint.
Yeah.
There's 1,200 years or 1,250 years that transpires because the Watchers descend in the days of Jared. I failed to mention.
Yeah.
Enoch's the seventh from Adam. Jared is the sixth from Adam. So the Watchers descended in the days of Jared, whose name means descent. Mm-hmm. So the Watchers make this transaction. They make this bargain with the sons of men. Then they begin to teach men forbidden knowledge.
Pharmaceuticals, sorcery.
These are the way that Iron Age people describe it. But I think it's much more technological. Yeah. I think they're literally teaching human beings what we would describe as science and technology.
Advanced technology.
They're teaching them how to make weapons of war, for one thing. Mm-hmm. And through this technology, through this knowledge, the human species was corrupted. And this was part of the plan of the Watchers. The Watchers have a plan, okay? The Watchers the impulse was lust, but they also wanted to have families. And their plan is revealed in what they do with their families. So they copulate with their wives, not just the maidens, they marry them, then they copulate with them under the covenant of marriage, and they procreate, they progenerate through their wives a race of hybrid giants. Now, why would they do that? What are the Watchers after here? This motive of the Watchers isn't explicit. I think it's implicit in the story. So this is me putting in parentheses here. I believe that the Watchers, their real objective was dominion of the earth through their hybrid sons, who are human enough to inherit the authority of Adam. So if they procreate sons who are the offspring of Adam, at least enough of the offspring of Adam, then they can legally govern the earth according to the rules, right? According to the mandate that was given to Adam. I think they're walking a very fine line here. They're being very cunning. And this is precisely what happens. The giants grow to an enormous size, and
the Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
Yep, that's right. That's the term.
They begin to devour all the acquisitions of the land, and men have to spend all of their energy feeding the giants. In other words, serving them. Men become the slaves to these giants. It was a Faustian bargain. Mm-hmm. And when they could no longer satiate their enormous appetites, the giants began to devour mankind. And it's at this point that men begin to cry out to God, to petition heaven. And so now you're going to see this what we were talking about last time, the mechanism of authority in the kingdom of heaven at work here. Now men, the governors of the earth, are repenting of this folly, are petitioning heaven. They're petitioning the king that he intervene. The king hears their petition and he determines to intervene. But this is after a very long time has
There's a lot of other things. I mean, not only did they copulate with women, but there was like a breeding program for animals as well, right? They started.
That comes from the Book of Giants.
Okay.
So the Book of Giants, which was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, it extrapolates on the story of the Watchers, but it focuses on the giants. So Enoch focuses mostly on the activities of the Watchers. The Book of Giants focuses mostly on the activity of the giants. And it names them. It names some of them. One of them, by the way, is Gilgamesh. So there's Manwë, there's Gilgamesh, there's a handful of giants that are named. The only place where Nephilim are named. And these giants in the Book of Giants, now we're departing from Enoch, we're in the Book of Giants, the Dead Sea Scroll Book of Giants. The giants are siblings, obviously, but there's a breed of monsters who are their associates, their companions. This is very interesting because there's a lot of synchronicity here between the Book of Giants and the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh had a human hybrid companion as well. And these companions are sentient monsters. They're called monsters in the Book of Giants. And the Book of Giants is highly fragmented. There's only a handful of paragraphs that have been able to be translated because it's so fragmented, it was not well preserved. But what you can glean from these fragments is that apparently the Watchers engaged in what the translators call miscegenation. Miscegenation is the mixing of species. So the Watchers apparently either did one of two things according to the Book of Giants. In the Book of Giants, I'm not sure that the Book of Giants is authentic, by the way.
Okay.
It's certainly authentic in terms of it's a Second Temple period manuscript that was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, 100%. But I'm not sure if it's true, if the story's true. It's an addendum to the Book of Enoch. But it's very interesting. So the Watchers apparently created these hybrid monsters either by copulating with them, so having sex with animals, and it says in the Book of Giants that each Watcher chose a different animal with which to copulate. And that's one explanation. Or we're looking at some sort of a scientific intervention, in vitro fertilization, where they were intentionally mutating God's creation on earth, creating their own
species,
creatures, creating their own sentient beings in their own likeness, as it were. So there's miscegenation going on in the Book of Giants, and they're sentient. So you know that it's in the Book of Giants is explicit that the Watchers are doing this intentionally. That comes from the Book of Giants. It's not in the Book of Enoch. It's a very good point because the two are often associated. It could be true, but just keep in mind that's a different narrative.
Gotcha.
But you go back to the Book of Enoch. So now you have men have been corrupted through the knowledge of the Watchers. There's a bloodlust that's been introduced on earth that had not previously existed. Mm-hmm. So men are slaughtering each other with these new technological toys that the Watchers have given them. And on top of that, you have the giants, the sons of the Watchers, who are dominating the earth, consuming all the acquisitions of the land and have subdued and enslaved the human species. And now God decides to intervene. Why? Because mankind begins to petition heaven. So God intervenes, and he sends a handful of angels down to the earth to bind the Watchers. The Watchers are bound. They're not yet cast into Tartarus. That comes later. They're bound and they're forced to watch, to observe the destruction of their beloved sons, the giants.
Well, this is a illustration of the kingdom of heaven coming to the petition of man.
Exactly right. So now here come the armies of the king.
Yeah.
They bind the Watchers, and as part of their punishment, the Watchers who love their sons are going to now observe their destruction. And another angel, I believe Uriel is designated for this task. He sets the giants into war with one another. He instigates conflict between them, and they go to war with one another. So now the Watchers are bound, and they're forced to watch the utter annihilation of their offspring in a fratricidal civil war.
And this is like Gabriel, Raphael, like these angels.
I believe the angels that are sent are Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, and Raphael. Yeah. Raphael is sent to heal the earth. from the corruption of the Watchers, whatever that means. Wrath, of course, means heel. So God intervenes, Watchers are bound, giants go to war with each other. Now, I'm going to extrapolate, okay?
Yeah.
So what I see happening here, it's not a bunch of dumb giants with clubs banging each other over the heads like the big stupid Disney giants. These are highly, highly intelligent beings. They have the knowledge of their fathers, advanced extraterrestrial beings. And I think the Watchers descended to Mount Hermon at the helms of advanced aerospace vehicles. So they're in possession of knowledge and technology. If you reckon the Genesis 5 genealogy through the Septuagint, then you have approximately 1,200 years or 1,250 years from the descent of the Watchers in the days of Jared to the flood. Okay, minimum. That's a 1,000-year Reich, right? I mean, that's a 1,000-year rule. And so the earth would have been absolutely dominated by the Watchers, but from behind the thrones of their hybrid offspring. This is the modus operandi. I call it rule by proxy. The Watchers themselves don't have the authority, as we talked about last time, to govern the earth. So they do it from behind the thrones of their human hybrid sons. Again, trying to skirt trying to play by the rules, right?
Right.
And not pay the consequences. So what I define this period of time of the rule of the Watchers on earth through their hybrid sons as the empire of the gods. And I believe what the Watchers did is precisely what we're told that the gods did in Plato's narrative of Atlantis, in the Critias and Timaeus dialogue. When Plato, this is where the story of Atlantis comes from.
Right.
And you have Solon of Athens traveling to Egypt, and he meets with the priests of Sais, and the priests begin to tell him about the story of Atlantis, among other things. And they tell him, as the beginning, the way that the story starts, at the beginning of the story, the gods, the Greek gods, are apportioning the earth amongst themselves. So let's change the Greek gods for the Watchers. They're apportioning, they're divvying up the earth amongst themselves. They're going to rule. So that's the first thing they do. There's 200 Watchers, so we can assume that there were 200 realms. Each of them had a realm. They were establishing their royal dynasties through their offspring. They divide the realm up, and then in the story of Atlantis, what do the gods do next? Well, this is illustrative in Poseidon, who becomes enamored of a human woman named Cleito, and he marries her. So now you have the gods, the Watchers, marrying human women, right? Dividing the earth up amongst themselves. And then he copulates with Cleito, and she gives birth to 10 hybrid twin sons, who I believe are giants. At least mythologically speaking, certainly, because the chief among them was Atlas, the giant, right? And these became the 10 kings of Atlantis. So there were 10 kings. And these kings ruled over the island of Atlantis, but they didn't just rule over the island of Atlantis, they ruled over the empire of Atlantis. Atlantis was an empire, according to the story. And then what's the next thing that happens? So we're tracking with Enoch here.
Right.
This
Greek mythology is
parallels the Book of Enoch, specifically Plato's account of Atlantis in the Critias and Timaeus dialogue, or Timaeus and Critias dialogue. It's paralleling the Book of Enoch. And so you have the gods apportioning the earth, becoming enamored of human women, marrying them, copulating with them, and now you have who's governing their kingdom? Their sons. The 10 kings of Atlantis are governing the empire. This is the Watchers in the Nephilim. And then what happens next in the story of Atlantis, Plato's account of Atlantis? The Atlanteans become a very expansionist empire. They go to war with their neighbors, and they're steamrolling everybody until they encounter the Athenians. And this is what the priests of Sais tell Solon, that you don't even know your history. You don't have any history that's hoary with age, they tell him. In other words, your histories only go back to the first cataclysm. Ours go back multiple cataclysms. And they said that your people are greater than you have even comprehended, because only the Athenians could resist the advance of the Atlanteans. And so the Atlanteans, who who are founded by Poseidon and are ruled over by the 10 hybrid kings, their empire comes up against the Athenians, who, according to Plato, Athens is founded by the goddess Athena. And so it's Athena in her kingdom versus Poseidon in his kingdom, and they're going to war. This is what I think is happening in the antediluvian world. Of course, that's Greek mythology. I think the reality is you have the Watchers and their offspring, and now their offspring are engaging in this civil war of giants. And then what happens in the story of Atlantis? Cataclysm. The war is brought to an abrupt halt because the cataclysm befalls. Atlantis is destroyed in a day and a night. Mm-hmm. And not just Atlantis, by extension, everybody's destroyed. Everybody.
This is the story of the flood.
It's the story of the flood. It's the cataclysm. So here again, we're paralleling the book of Enoch, because in Enoch, after the giants go to war with each other, they annihilate each other, then comes the flood.
And I think in 1 Enoch 10, it really suggests that the flood was due to the sin and the corruption of what the Watchers brought.
That's precisely right. So the Watchers corrupted
it's not just
the earth.
the fall of man.
It was two kinds of corruption. It was the corruption of the hearts of men. Men were corrupted through the knowledge of the Watchers, which was forbidden. And a genetic corruption. Because in the book of Genesis, it says that all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth, except for Noah, who was found to be pure, and I believe that's tamim, genetically pure, in the sight of God, so that Noah could continue the line of Adam. Why? So that the Messiah could come. So God preserved the seed. Because this ties back to something we didn't mention. I mean, there's a lot here. We didn't mention what I call the dragon slayer prophecy in Genesis 3. So you have, in Genesis 3, you have the serpent and the woman Eve being judged, being sentenced for their sin. And God judges the serpent. He says, on your belly you're going to crawl. And he judges the woman. He tells her that your pain in childbearing is going to be increased, and that your seed and the seed of the serpent are going to be in conflict. That your seed, that the seed of the serpent is going to bruise your seed's heel, but your seed, he's going to crush the serpent's head. That's the first messianic prophecy. So the dragon knows, Lucifer, for lack of a better term, Lucifer knows that the dragon slayer, that the Savior, the Messiah, who's going to crush his head, is coming through the line of Adam. Right? He knows, specifically through the line of Seth. Right. So if he can destroy the earth, if he can corrupt the earth, he can forestall what I call the dragon slayer prophecy, his fate.
Right.
But he can't, because God preserves the seed of Eve, of Adam and Eve, through Noah.
So everyone or everything that God allowed to get on that ark, Noah's ark, would have been Noah, his sons, the women, and the animals. They would have been uncorrupted.
It would have been. That's why God selected the animals. He brought them to Noah. God selected the animals. So to make sure that only the animals that were not genetically corrupted would repopulate the earth in the wake of the flood.
Essentially, you had a pure genetic stock to repopulate.
Exactly right.
There's a reset button.
Exactly right. Yeah. So now, we were talking off camera about the nature of the flood and how the Nephilim survived. Because we know, you read in the Bible, of course.
I mean, you have Goliath.
You have the Anakim.
Yeah.
You have the Zamzummim. You have the Rephaim. You have these tribes of giants in the post-flood world, inhabiting Canaan.
So how'd the bloodline of the Watchers survive?
So this is very complex. And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. People always, they want a quick and easy answer. There is none. Yeah. So, I mean, you can invent one, but if you really think about it, the answers, you're going to encounter a web of complexity here. Because you can't start with how do the giants survive the flood? You have to go back and ask, what was the extent of the flood? Now, most Christians who hear this for the first time are taken aback, and they think, well, that's not a question. Obviously, the Bible says that all of the dry land was covered and that everything that had breath died, and it's obvious. Unfortunately, it's not. It's obvious to lay people. It's not obvious to scholars. And the reason why is because you can take all the same terminology, the actual terminology in the Hebrew that's used to fortify the idea that the entire earth was submerged in water. You can take those same words and translate them in such a way, not manipulate them, just an alternate translation, alternate understanding, and derive what's called a local flood theory. And scholars, there's many scholars who subscribe to this, using just the text, not extrapolating, not engaging in conjecture or theorizing, just using the text. So there's a lot of scholars who are local flood scholars. And basically what they think is that the flood was localized to Mesopotamia, to the ancient Near East. So that every mountain in the ancient Near East, every high hill in the ancient Near East that was visible in that region that Noah was living in was submerged, or was temporarily submerged, or was submerged for a period of time, what have you. And again, people who encounter this for the first time, the initial reaction is one of aggression, hostility, and rejection. Mm-hmm. But once you familiarize yourself with the scholarship on this, it's evident that there's a compelling case that's just as compelling as the global flood that can be made for a local flood. Do I subscribe to a local flood? No, I have a different theory. Mm-hmm. And what I think, my theory, and I could be completely wrong, but my theory is that it wasn't a global flood. In other words, every square inch of ground was covered by water. And it wasn't just a local flood, a flood that was localized to the ancient Near East. Rather, it was a global cataclysm in which there was catastrophic flooding. That's a nuanced view in between. So the entire earth was rocked by cataclysm. Much of the earth was inundated, the coastal areas, the rivers inundated. But the entire earth was devastated to some extent. So if you have a global flood, if every single thing that had breath on the face of the earth died, and there's problems with that, by the way. There's a lot of problems with global flood theory. But if you have a global flood, then the only way the giants survive is one of two ways. Either they're hanging onto the ark, as the Second Temple literature says. Yeah, they're hanging onto the ark to make it through. Doubtful, right?
Right.
They're going to hang onto the ark for a year. Yeah. Or somehow the genetic material makes it through the line, makes it through probably Noah's sons' wives. That's the idea, specifically through the line of Ham. Okay, Noah had 3 sons: Shem, Japheth, and Ham. So did it come through Ham? Okay, those are the 2 ideas there. There's a third. The third is there's some kind of sorcery that happens after the flood. This comes from, I believe, the Book of Jubilees, or Jasher, I can't recall, where Ham discovers a tablet, it's writing of the Watchers, and there's some sort of an invocative thing, and he's able to reconstitute the Nephilim. Something like that, okay. So that's a possibility as well. Those are the possibilities there. Now, if it's a local flood, well, problem solved. Right. The flood wasn't all over the earth, and some of the giants survived. They weren't flooded. Okay. And people were going to contend, yeah, but it says everything that had breath died. Believe me, just look at the scholarship. You're going to see very quickly that scholars do not agree. Not all scholars agree on the interpretation there. And then the third option, which is the one that I favor, the global cataclysm, which is very similar to local flood, but I think there's way more catastrophic flooding than the local flood would countenance. And in that scenario, you have possibility in which giants survive as well. They just survive, right? None of this is anti-biblical. None of these ideas. Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, none of these ideas are anti-biblical. They don't change the message. They don't change the meaning of the story. And again, there are plenty of scholars on both sides. So I think that the entire earth was subjected to a cataclysm of varying degrees, depending on where you live. You're talking extreme volcanism for one thing, volcanoes going off.
Earthquakes,
I think it was initiated by an impact. We don't have to go there. But the Younger Dryas impact theory hypothesis, I subscribe to that. There is a cometary impact or a piece of an asteroid that hit the ice sheets, and that is the result was what the Bible calls the flood of Noah, and that happened sometime around 10,500 BC, or in the neighborhood of 10,000 BC.
There's some modern stories of giants, and you're pretty familiar with one of them. And I've been to Afghanistan quite a bit. Is the giants of Kandahar? What's the validity?
Okay, so this is a good segue because we know, biblically speaking, there were giants after the flood, before and after the flood. The giants after the flood, Goliath of Gath, his brothers, and the Anakim, the giants that the Israelites encountered in the Promised Land. Some scholars think that those giants were actually not very tall, that they were just like 6 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall. I don't think so. I've seen too much anecdotal evidence around the world in the form of historical documentation and eyewitness testimony of people who've dug up the bones. No, not the bones of mastodons and giant sloths. These were skeletal remains wearing jewelry, rings on the fingers, necklaces around the collar. And last time I checked, dinosaurs and mastodons and giant sloths didn't wear bling. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we know, historically speaking, that every single culture on Earth practically has legends of giants. Believe that giants roam the earth. The Native Americans in America, the Inca in Peru, the Aztec, they all believe.
Well, I'm a giant to the Inca.
You are. That's true. That's true. But again, I'm going to go back.
That's why I like going there.
The giants from my investigations had to be larger than me. They were enormous. We're talking 8 to 15 feet tall. Right. So based on, this is anecdotal, but based on my investigations, places like Sardinia, for example. So you have post-flood giants. The question that a lot of people ask is, are there still giants alive today? Now, I made a film with Steve Quayle years ago called Holocaust of Giants. It was in the True Legend series. The reason why we called it Holocaust of Giants is because there was a program of extermination to rid the earth of these giants. Certainly in the Promised Land, Joshua was supposed to eliminate them all. He didn't get the job done. So David picked up the torch and fought the remaining tribes of giants and so forth. Not all of the giants were destroyed. Some of them made it here to America. And I think they exist still today in very limited numbers in the remotest parts of the earth. There's a story in Peru, for example. I won't go into detail. There's a story in Peru of I believe it was a explorer from National Geographic who encountered a giant in the mountains of Peru and wrote about it, documented it. Mm-hmm. A very tall giant who impeded him from continuing along a path on the mountain.
And people that, like Elia Marzulli, believe that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, is Nephilim.
Well, Sasquatch definitely is gigantic. I mean, 7 to 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
Whether or not the Sasquatch has anything to do with Nephilim, I don't know.
Right.
But the most credible story that I've encountered, one of the most, I shouldn't say that because I've encountered a lot of credible stories. One of the most credible stories that I've ever encountered is today known as the Kandahar Giant. Mm. And this has become kind of like a legend on the internet. And me and Steve Quayle are responsible for this, primarily Steve, because when I worked with Steve Quayle, the author, researcher Steve Quayle, best known for his research into the topic of giants, Steve was contacted by the mother of an active duty Air Force pilot. And she told Steve he needs to talk to her son because her son has a very important story to tell him about giants. Her son did not want to talk to anybody. His mother convinced him to talk to Steve. He came forward and talked to Steve. Steve convinced him to come here to Bozeman, Montana, where we would interview him, Steve and I, for our film, our upcoming film, that one was actually called The Unholy Sea. That was in the beginning of The Unholy Sea. And so the pilot, who I don't want to name, he came here to visit us and to do the interview. He did not want his name out there, and he wanted to be filmed in silhouette. He didn't want his face on camera. He showed us his credentials. He was active duty. He was an active duty Air Force pilot. He was primarily a C-130 pilot, so a cargo pilot. And he told us, the story he told us is as follows. He would be occasionally, routinely actually, called into Afghanistan to the Bagram airfield to pick up what he described as high-valued assets. And what the high-valued assets usually were Taliban guys, right? High-level terrorists or Taliban. And one day he's flying in on a routine mission. They called him in to pick up some cargo. And this again is at Bagram airfield. He lands. He's got his loadmaster with him and his crew. He lands in Bagram. And normally he lands and he deplanes and he goes and escorts himself into the hangar. On this occasion, when he landed, he was met on the tarmac by people he describes as the babysitters. And these individuals, he believed, were Air Force intelligence or members of the intelligence community. I think he believed they were Air Force intelligence. This was unprecedented. They met him on the tarmac. They said, "This never happened. This is highly classified. This never happened." And so he and his loadmaster were basically warned. This is top secret. So then they were escorted by the babysitters to the hangar. And as he approached the hangar, he saw a bulk on a pallet, on one of those large Air Force pallets, which I think is 9x14, something like that, one of those large Air Force pallets. And as he sees this bulk and some guys standing around it, and as he's approaching, he said the first thing that hit him was the odor coming off of this thing. He said it smelled like BO and death. And as he got close to it, he realized...
Could have been Taliban. I've been around some stanky Taliban.
Well, it kind of was. So as he got close, he saw that there was a tarp covering this bulk. And then he got close enough to realize that the bulk was a humanoid in the fetal position. But part of his body was hanging out from under the tarp. His feet, his hands, and part of his head. And he walked up to this thing, and he said it was enormous. And he noticed immediately that the hands hanging out of the tarp had 6 fingers, that the toes and the feet were 6. The feet were wrapped in a crude canvas type cloth. The hair of the giant, of this gigantic humanoid, was red, and the skin was pale. He thinks it could have been because he was dead for a couple of days, or that's just the way the skin was. It was pale. And he said that he took his fist and pounded it on top of the bulk, on the body. He said it was a brick. He said this guy was solid muscle. And they estimated him at 10 to 12 feet tall, based on the size of the pallet. I think 9 feet long pallet. He's in the fetal position. He's hanging out. He's 10 to 12 feet tall, probably closer to 12. And he said that they had to load him, because the loadmaster has to load anything weigh. They had to weigh him because the loadmaster has to weigh anything that goes under the C-130 protocol. And they weighed him at 1,500 pounds. Then when you subtract the pallet, the bulk, the dude weighed 1,100 pounds. Or it was something, he weighed 1,100. I can't remember the total weight. I think it was 1,500, maybe it was 13 or 14. But I know the figure of the weight of the man. It was 1,100 pounds. An 1,100 pound, 12 foot tall giant. That's what was under that tarp.
Yeah.
6 fingers, 6 toe, red hair.
That's not a genetic defect.
No.
Yeah.
And of course he was curious, and the intelligence guys were there, and a couple what he thought were Marines guarding the body. And he asked these guys about the giant. Where did this come from? And they said, well, we don't know for sure, but here's what we heard. And they related this story to him. They said that there was a lost platoon out in Afghanistan, or rather not a platoon, a team. There was a lost team out there in Afghanistan doing reconnaissance or something. And it turns out that these guys had come to a cave, and the villagers were aiding and abetting what they thought were the Taliban in the cave, because they were leaving items at the mouth of the cave. So they thought, there's Taliban in there. So they went into the cave. But instead of finding Taliban, they were confronted with this giant. And according to what these guys had heard, the giant killed them all. That's why they were lost. The giant killed them. So another team was dispatched to go and find these guys. They came to the cave, they went into the cave, and they found allegedly the giant eating on the dead guys. And they took him down. And in this firefight, this information came later, I believe. I'm not sure. L.A. Marzulli also has a Kandahar Giant story that comes from a different source. We're not sure to this day if it's the same story. If it is, this giant skewered one of the guys. That one of these special forces guys that was taking this giant down, he got skewered. And if it's the same story, these might be two different Kandahar Giant stories. But what's consistent in both stories is a transport helicopter was dispatched. They picked up the giant, they brought it to Bagram. And then they called in the pilot to come pick it up. He loaded it and he took it to Qatar. Now he thinks that it went to either a base in Germany, or he said he heard through the grapevine that it might have made its way to Wright-Patterson, the giant, the body of the giant.
Right.
Now, that's a fantastic story. Okay, that's an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think I'm nuts for telling it, and I won't stop telling it because I've confirmed that story.
Yeah.
With a couple of sources, and I'm not going to reveal anything about these sources because I like these guys and I don't want to ever get them in trouble.
Based on your investigation and people you've talked to, you confirm.
I've confirmed this with two. I can't remember if it's two, definitely two sources that were there during this time frame. Okay, one is a very high-level Air Force guy. And not only did he confirm that story, he told me some other giant stories as well. He said there was more than one. And I don't have permission to repeat those stories, but not publicly. So very, very credible people. The pilot himself was credible. Active duty, AC-130, didn't want his face shown, didn't want his name ever published.
No reason to make up a story about it.
It was his mom who convinced him to do it. And I met him personally. We spent time with me and Steve Quayle. And both Steve and I were very impressed and 100% convinced that this guy was telling the truth. Didn't want any money, didn't want any notoriety, just wanted to just tell this story. He told us some other things too, some personal stories along with this. But that was the Kandahar Giant story. That's how it started. And Steve went on Coast to Coast AM and he related that story to George Norrie, and then it became like this mythological thing all over the internet. But it's true.
Why do you believe that the powers to be conceal these information, the UFO stuff, the giants? Like, why do you think that there's so much secrecy?
I was just about to tell you, look, I investigate all kinds of stuff all around the world.
Right.
I interface with high-level people. And I ask these people about aliens and UFOs, and they tell me things. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some things that they'll hesitate or they'll say, I can't tell you that. Mm-hmm. But they'll tell me, they'll talk about UFOs, right?
And we're gonna do another episode together.
Yeah, and they'll talk about UFOs. It's not that big of a deal, right? These guys know that UFOs are real.
Yeah.
Some of them know gray aliens are real. And it's not that big of a deal. But if you broach the topic of giants, it's a totally different reaction. These guys seal their lips. Some of them, I've again, talking about aliens, not really a problem. Talk about giants and suddenly a shudder of trepidation comes over them.
That was on Hillary's hard drive that she...
There's something about the topic of giants that is, the impression I get is that it's more highly classified than aliens, if that's even possible.
Yeah.
And why would that be? Like, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
And people say, well, because it proves the Bible true and blah, blah, blah. The problem with that is,
I don't think
it doesn't just prove the Bible true. Then you could say it proves the Epic of Gilgamesh true, and it proves all these different legends and the Greek mythology.
Yeah.
So it's not really specific to the Bible. The Bible's not the only ancient document that cites giants, not by a long stretch, right? So that's a weak argument in my estimation. There's something else much more sinister going on here. What do I think it is? I think that the remains of giants are used for necromantic purposes.
What do you mean by that?
Because in the land of Canaan and on the island of Sardinia and in other places, we know that there was a Canaanitish cult of giants, and that the Canaanites believed that they could make contact or communicate with dead giants. And we don't have time to get into this, but this is evident on the island of Sardinia, the tombs of the giants and so forth. There are rites of incubation where young people, as a rite of passage, would go into these tombs and commune with the spirits of the dead heroes, the giants buried beneath. To this day, they're called the Tomb of the Giants. It is a necromantic rite, right? So necromancy is summoning the dead. That's what necromancy is. And there's something about the giants that allows them to be summoned, their spirits. This goes back to the Book of Enoch. I failed to mention this, that when the giants were deceased, when they either killed each other or died in the flood, part of their judgment was that their spirits that proceeded from their bodies would be called evil spirits, and that they would be cursed to wander the earth with all of the desires and impulses of the flesh, but without bodies through which to fulfill or satiate those desires. So this is the Pirates of the Caribbean, the curse of the Mayan gold. Remember? Yeah. Barbosa wants to eat the apple. That's all they want, is to break this curse because they're hungry, they're thirsty, but they can't eat anything. That's the Nephilim. That's the curse of the Nephilim. So their spirits are cursed to wander the earth as vagabond wraiths. Hungry, thirsty, sexual impulses, presumably all the desires of the flesh, but no flesh through which to satisfy any of this. So what do? They inhabit humans. These are the possessing spirits. They were called evil spirits or unclean spirits in the Book of Enoch. Jesus encounters these spirits in the New Testament. He calls them unclean spirits. These are the spirits that he's casting out. So those possessing spirits are the spirits of dead Nephilim, which persist in the earth. And remember, this is a curse. So this is an unnatural state. So it's true, biblically speaking, that you can make contact with the spirits of dead giants. Maybe that's why they want the bodies, for these necromantic rites, to invoke the spirits of dead giants, the demons. By the way, that's what demons are. In Hebrew cosmology, demons are exclusively the disembodied spirits of dead giants. Exclusively, that's what a demon is. So you have, let's go back to Jesus, who's encountering these demonized people, these demon-possessed individuals. These are unclean spirits. He casts them out. Remember the Gadarene demoniac? Well, in the Book of Enoch, the judgment, the curse of the giants, which is that they're going to wander as these vagabond wraiths, hungry, thirsty, sexual impulses, can't satisfy them, until the great judge appears to judge the earth. Fast forward to Jesus. He's in Gadarene, in the land of Gadarene, or Gadara rather. He's in the land of Gadara, and he's approached by, depending on which gospel you're reading, a man or two men who are filled with a legion of demons. These unclean spirits, the spirits of dead giants. That's what they're possessed with. And they come and they throw themselves at the feet of Jesus of Nazareth. Why? Because they're thinking, wait a minute, the judge is here. It's not time yet. Because the day of judgment is at the end of the age. So they throw themselves at the feet of Jesus, and what do they say to him? We know who you are, you son of man. Why have you come to torment us before the appointed time? What are they talking about? The Book of Enoch. That's what they're talking about. The appointed time of judgment, when the great judge appears. Here's the judge. The judge is the Son of Man from the oracles of Enoch. That's Jesus of Nazareth. He's standing there in the land of Gadara in the flesh, and they know it's not time yet. That's why they throw themselves at his feet and say that. Jesus is the judge. They didn't realize he was going to come first to redeem us and then come back to judge the world. So the point is that the spirits of dead giants are still active in the world and can be contacted. So I think that the occult, members of the occult, are using the bodies of giants to summon the spirits of the giants, the demonic spirits. For what purpose? I don't know. To harness their energy, to harness their powers, because they want to be possessed, because they want to extract knowledge from them.
Yeah.
These beings have knowledge. They're ancient. They're exceedingly ancient. They're fathers of the Watchers. They know things. It's necromancy. That's the only conclusion I can draw at this point.
Yeah.
It's necromancy. Yes, in the Podesta emails, Hillary Clinton was inquiring about the body of Gilgamesh. Mm-hmm. Why? I think that these are vessels. The bodies maybe are still somehow connected, interlaced with the spirits. So maybe, I'm just conjecture, maybe if you have the body of a giant, you can summon its spirit. Maybe there's still that connection. You can contact the spirit of the dead giant. So
certainly the occult would.
It's necromancy.
Yes.
And it's highly classified.
Yeah, it is a strange and peculiar secrecy behind this stuff that we know is true.
Yeah. So it's if you were to ask me, are giants still alive in the world today? Yes. In Kandahar.
Yes. Two more things. One, you don't have to go in depth in this. You are, spend your life looking at these megalith structures. That is evidence of a pre-diluvial world, and not only that, but technology. As people, this whole show's in this ancient aliens, right? They're trying to figure out who built these pyramids.
There are. I don't know who built the megaliths. I am convinced they're antediluvian. And there are various candidates for who built the megaliths. Is it possible that the offspring of Adam built the megaliths? They were extraordinary people, much more physically robust than we are, much more intelligent, and possibly they were capable of telepathy, telekinesis. Who knows?
So they could have done it without the Watchers.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But it's also possible that this was the architecture of the Watchers, that this was part of the knowledge that was given to mankind, and that this had something to do with the Watchers and their hybrid offspring. That's also possible. Do I think that the Inca, for example, built the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman and Cusco? No. In fact, I know they didn't. My colleague Anselm Pirambla, he's a Spanish explorer, and he and I have done a lot of work together in Peru. He did excavations at the walls of Sacsayhuaman years ago, decades ago, and he dug down to the foundations of those megalithic walls. And he did not find any Inca artifacts, only pre-Inca artifacts at the foundational level of the wall. In archaeology, that's called proof.
Yeah.
Okay? That's proof that the Inca didn't build the walls. They're at the very least, they're pre-Inca, those megalithic walls, in Sacsayhuaman. Now, the Inca were phenomenal masons. They could build amazing things, aqueducts. They were absolute geniuses. Masonry and the way that they can control waters, the flow of water, and the hybridization of crops and so forth. They were very, very advanced, the Inca. But the Inca never recorded anywhere or even ever said, and there's no traditions anywhere that the Inca built any of the megaliths in Peru. In fact, if you go to Peru today, and archaeologists completely disregard this, and you go to the Quechua people who are still there in Cusco. You were in Cusco, you saw them. They're the ones dressed in the bright red clothes and the typical Andean garb. Those people, many of them only speak Quechua. And if you ask them, who built the walls of Sacsayhuaman? You know what they're going to tell you? Giants. That's their tradition. Now, that doesn't mean that the walls of Sacsayhuaman were built by giants, but their tradition, which is older than the Inca, they believed that the walls were built by giants. And I say it's older than the Inca because the tradition probably comes from the Aymara. The Aymara people who live around Lake Puno in the Altiplano of Peru, Lake Titicaca rather, the Aymara will tell you the same thing. Who built Tiwanaku, the megalithic site of Tiwanaku, which is older than the Inca Empire? The Aymara people will tell you, giants. So, do I think that the megaliths in Peru were built by giants? Some of them, no. Why? Because they're not proportional to giants. Mm-hmm. Others, like the walls of Sacsayhuaman, It's possible. If you go to, were you at Sacsayhuaman in Cusco?
No, I just did Machu Picchu.
Oh, you got to go back with me.
I got buddy. Let's
So
go.
I'll take you to Sacsayhuaman, and you'll notice that the doorways are the trapezoidal doorways are 10 feet tall. So could it accommodate a 9 foot tall, 8 foot tall giant? Absolutely.
Was it built for a 5 foot Inca?
No, the distance between the stairs is not normal. It's very, very wide. It's not natural when you walk up those stairs. If we were building those stairs, we would have added more levels to make it more natural to our stride. It's not. It's built for the stride of a much larger person, of an 8, 9 foot tall person. So, am I saying that the walls of Sacsayhuaman were built by giants? Absolutely not. I don't know. I know what the traditions say, and I know what the architecture can accommodate. If you go over to Ollantaytambo, it's different. Ollantaytambo has some of the most exquisite Cyclopean architecture on Earth. Cyclopean architecture, that's the technical designation in archaeology for megalithic architecture, where the jointery doesn't have any sort of a binding agent, no mortar, and it's perfectly fit together. That's Cyclopean. By the way, the reason why it's Cyclopean is because the Greeks believed who built the megaliths in Greece?
Cyclops.
The Cyclopes, who were the giant one-eyed offspring of the gods. Okay, the tradition is ubiquitous. So I think that in Ollantaytambo, as opposed to Sacsayhuaman, the accommodation, the proportions of the doorways and so forth or the dimensions rather, are not proportional to people of gigantic stature. So there's no blanket answer here.
Right.
It's not, well, the giants built them all. That can't be true, because you wouldn't build a house that you have to get on hands and knees to get through the door,
Right.
or where your shoulders are rubbing against the corridor, the walls of the corridor, right? You would build your edifice proportional to your stature, period. Everybody would. So there's no easy answer here. Then you can throw into the mix the elongated skull race, whose skulls have been discovered at these megalithic sites. Is there another subspecies of Homo sapien involved here that had other capabilities, larger brains perhaps? They were very diminutive people, very small people with very large craniums. So there's a lot of possibilities, and I refuse to be married to any of them because I simply don't know. The one thing that I'm almost certain about is that the Inca didn't build the megaliths in Peru, that the Romans didn't build Baalbek, not the foundations of it. They built on it, on top. The Inca built on top of the foundations like at Machu Picchu. I don't believe that the Greeks built the megaliths in Greece. I think these things belong to the antediluvian world. And that much I'm convinced of, because nobody claims to have built these megaliths.
Right.
And why wouldn't you claim that if you built them?
Proud of it. Yeah.
So we know, for example, that Pachacutec in the Inca Emperor Pachacutec, that he initiated a massive building project in Peru and in the Inca Empire, and he built many things, and he claimed to build them, and he put his name on them. Never claimed to build the walls of Sacsayhuaman. So he put his name on them in the sense that in tradition, that it was he who built these palaces and this, because the Inca didn't have a writing system. They used a form of knotted rope called quipus. So anyway, I mean, we could go on for hours.
Oh yeah, I could ask about this for forever. I have one just to wrap this up and let you get to with your family and get back to bed or get to bed. We talked about Lucifer and Lucifer being cast out of heaven. You know, from our elder race, from our family race, cast out of heaven with the angels that are part of his rebellion, and they're find themselves on earth and separate from the Watchers. The Watchers either skirted the rules or broke the rules.
That's right. Yeah.
But Lucifer and the fallen angels did not.
Well, I don't believe that Satan is directly implicated in the sin of the Watchers.
Right.
He may have been involved in enticing them, tempting them to do what they did. That's just pure speculation.
Right.
There's nothing in the Book of Enoch that would suggest that. But people confuse the fall of the Watchers and the fall of Satan
Separate.
and his angels. Those are separate occurrences. Now, some scholars believe, like the late Michael Heiser, for whom I have a great deal of respect, that the fall of Satan occurred at Eden. That was the moment when that incident happened. That Satan's fall was at Eden, corresponds to the fall of mankind. I don't believe so. I believe it happened a long time ago in the distant past, and there was a war in the cosmos. And I read a lot about that in Birthright. The Watchers were later. The Watchers were much later. Human beings are on the earth. This was in the days of Jared. So you had 6 generations of human beings populating the earth before the Watchers descended. So Satan and his angels are already here.
So because they're already here, that kind of leads to my question. The name of the show's, the Resilient Show. And I always think of a lesson that we could be resilient. Like knowledge is power to be resilient about a threat in the future. And if Satan and the fallen angels are here, do they have the ability to do the same thing the Watchers did to humans? Is that something we should
If they did that, then they know what the repercussion would be.
Right.
It would be retribution. And I think Satan is going to do that at the end of the age when he knows his time is short. Because I believe that the Antichrist...
he hasn't done it yet, but...
I believe that the Antichrist will literally be the son of Satan, hybrid son of Satan.
Through the same acts that the Watchers perform.
Copulation with a human woman.
Yeah.
That's just my belief about that.
Sure.
I do talk about that a little bit in Birthright.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating. That's why I asked it, and it's
a good point. It's important to distinguish between those two events.
Yeah.
The Watchers are a separate group. Mm-hmm. They come after the fall of what the Bible calls the devil and his angels. They're in the days of Jared, whereas I believe that the original fall of these angelic beings, the insubordinate sons of God, is the way I think of them, or the apostate sons of God, that happened a long time ago, and that in fact their civilization was inhabiting the planets, or at least 1 or 2 planets in our solar system, namely Mars and the one that exploded. That's another conversation.
Yeah, I love that.
For another time.
Well, last bit of advice for the listeners in the terms of being resilient. What advice would you have for those listening about living?
I would say that, there's a dozen things we didn't get to talk about. We are moving into an nearly unprecedented age. Mm-hmm. We are going to see at some point in the future a post-human species on planet Earth. The rise of AI, robots, the alien presence, all of this is culminating at the end of the age. And so it's important more than ever that those of us who believe in Christ anchor ourselves deeply into the gospel of Christ so that we are unmoved as these things unfold. And that is, I think, the most important thing. I'm going around on different podcasts and urging people to consider 2 questions that no other generation has had to think about before, and we can talk about this in another interview in the future. What does it mean to be a human being, and is our humanity worth preserving? Because those are the days we're in now.
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is what we talked about earlier, which we are made in the image of God. We're the offspring of Adam. We have redemption in Christ. So we must preserve our humanity in order to qualify for redemption in the cross of Christ. So that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But I would say we as believers in Christ need to make sure that our roots are deep in the gospel.
Yes. Another bit of advice I'll pivot off of for you is for the listeners is read Tim's book, Birthright. It's incredible.
Birthright. We talk about all the things we've talked about. Yeah. Everything besides the Kandahar Giant. Yeah. Everything we talked about is in Birthright and much more. I talk about the alien presence. I talk about transhumanism and how this all culminates in Armageddon. But also, we talked about the Book of Enoch, and I published a Book of Enoch with the guys from the Blurry Creatures podcast. And if you want the history about the Book of Enoch, everything we talked about, I have commentary, and I wrote the introduction to this Book of Enoch, which you can get on Amazon.
I haven't read that one yet, so I'm going to go
here,
back.
This is yours.
Oh, thank you. So I got my copy. Go on Amazon and get yours, and you get Birthright anywhere.
Both of these books you can get on Amazon.
Yep.
Just type my name in. and you'll see my publications.
Tim, thank you so much. Thanks for
brother.
opening your home.
Of course.
We got some gifts for you. We're going to get you a Smith & Wesson firearm, some Gators eyewear, and I brought this in person for you because I know you're taking off overseas again, and so I want you to have some Vortex Fury HD optics with a rangefinder built in. These are awesome. I have them myself.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for this. In fact, I've been meaning to get a rangefinder. So here it is.
That is awesome. They're awesome. Lifetime. If you don't know anything about Vortex, like no questions asked, lifetime warranty.
That's awesome.
Pass it down to your kids.
I'm gonna make good use of this. I live in Montana, so we hunt a lot.
Yes. Okay. Well, guys, please follow Tim. Get his book. Like this. Comment, subscribe, and share this as far as possible. Also, if you're not already a member of Patreon, go on Patreon. We're going to bug Tim for 5 more minutes at the end of this. He's tired. But for some Patreon content for you to tune into, it's going to be great. See you next week. God bless and stay resilient. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You can join for $15 a month and get behind the scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.